ISO 14000 is required because it guarantees the quality of a product by implementing exhaustive controls, ensuring that all the processes involved in its manufacture operate within the expected characteristics. The ISO 14000 family express have a positive environmental management system should be constituted. This standard has been designed to build a perfect balance between economic savings and reduction of environmental impacts. ISO 14001 refers specifically to the environmental management system, is to say, that part of the overall management system that includes the organizational structure, planning activities, responsibilities, practices, procedures, process and resources for developing, implementing, achieving, reviewing, and maintaining the environmental policy. Companies that follow the process suggested by these environmental management standards benefit by reducing environmental remediation costs, improving efficiency, and reducing adverse environmental impacts. About the 14001 standards, the purpose of this international standard is to provide organizations with a framework for protecting the environment and responding to changing environmental conditions in balance with socioeconomic needs. The Standard 14002 provides guidance and details special considerations for small and medium-sized companies seeking to implement ISO 14001. ISO 14004 standard practical guide to create an effective Sigma or improve the existing one. It is an internal application standard. ISO 14010 and ISO 14011 set out all the general principles on environmental audits that apply to all environmental audit examinations. ISO 14012 standard establishes the fundamental criteria for the qualification of auditors. ISO 14013 standard establishes a consultation guide for the review of environmental certification. ISO 14014 standard generates a guide for the initial review of all environmental management systems. ISO 14015 is a guide containing the criteria necessary to carry out an environmental site assessment. ISO 14020. This document provides guidance on the goals and principles that should frame all environmental labeling programs and efforts, including practitioner programs and self-declaration. ISO 14021. This document provides guidance on the terminology, symbols, test, and verification methodologies that an organization should use for self-declaration of the environmental aspects of its products and services. ISO 14024. This document provides the principles and protocols that third-party labeling programs, sellers, or practitioners should follow when developing environmental criteria for a particular product. Thanks to the ISO 14001 standard, it is possible to evaluate the performance of the environment and develop the necessary tools to achieve environmental objectives. It is only used internally in the organization. ISO 14032 standard generates a guide of specific indicators for the industrial sector. ISO 14040 standard is about aims to provide a clear overview of the practice, application, and limitation of life cycle assessment to a wide range of potential users and interest parties, including those with limited knowledge of life cycle assessment. ISO 14042. The objective of this document is to provide guidance on the impact assessment phase of LACA. ISO 14043. The objective of this document is to provide guidance on the interpretation of LAC results in relation to the goal definition phase of the LCA study, with review of the scope of LCA as well as the nature and quality of data collected.
Why is ISO 14001 certification important? 1. Improve the identification of current and future legal requirements that apply to them. 2. Allows to know and control the level of environmental performance of the whole organization. 2. 3. It favors the detection of improvement opportunities in the manufacturing of the product. 4. It facilitates a plain adaptation to new requirements and improves internal communication through participation in the development of objectives that are shared by the entire organization. 5. Enhances access to up-to-date information regarding the development of new technologies applicable to the sector. 6. Provides updated data that allows the establishment of priorities for action. History ISO 14000. The emergence of the ISO 14000 series as a standard is a direct consequence of the GATT round of negotiation in Uruguay and the United Nations Rio de Janeiro Summit of the Environment, both of which took place in 1992. Due to the rapid acceptance of the ISO 9000 series and the emergence of a large number of environmental standards around the world, ISO recognized the need to create an administrative standard in the environmental area. In 1991, the Strategic Advisory Group on the Environment's sake had been created in 1992. Due to the recommendation of the group, the ISO TC 207 committee was created to bring together representatives from industry, standards bodies, government, and environmental agencies. It is worth highlighting two aspects of ISO 14000: the certification of the environmental management system through which companies will receive the certificate, the environmental seal through which product will be certified Green Seal. ISO 14000 is based on the old British standard BS 7750, which was officially published by the British Standard Institution BSI prior to the UN World Environment Meeting. A brief history of ISO 14001. The history of ISO 14001 reflects the ever-changing and growing expectation of customers and citizens in relation to business environmental performance. Prior to the publication of the ISO 14001 Environmental Management Standard, the British Standard Institute published BS 7750 in response to a growing need by organizations that were being asked to demonstrate environmental credentials. BS 7750 laid the foundation for the initial version of ISO 14001, which was published in 1996. The initial ISO 14001 standard set some minimum requirements based on environmental policies and objectives that the organization needed to define. For the most part, the focus was on pollution control and management of negative impacts on the environment. The latest iteration of the ISO 14001 standards encompasses the risk-based approach and allows priority to be given to risks and opportunities relevant to the organization. When combined with minimum requirements, such as compliance to legislation and commitments such as the prevention of pollution, an organization is driven to developing a more comprehensive environmental strategy and action plan.
What is the ISO 14000 certification process? Preliminary assessment. Some certificate organizations perform a preliminary assessment or differential analyzing between the environmental management system and the main requirements of ISO 40001. Documentation review. Ensure that the environmental management system documents are present and prepared, such as environmental policies, objectives and targets, procedures, etc. Initial assessment. A site visit has to be carried out to ensure that the site is ready for the main assessment. Main assessment. This is carried out to enable to the necessary modification, detect during the initial assessment and documentation review to be made. It also involves a detailed assessment of all the components of the EMC based on the requirements of ISO 40001. Certification. ISO favorable assessment is made. The certificate uses the certificate to the entity and must notify the national body responsibility for the supervision of the implementation of ISO 40001. Surveillance. Once the certificate has been obtained, the environmental management system must be evaluated from time to time by the certification body to ensure that all the requirements of ISO 40001 are continually met. Should I be ISO 40001 certificate? A credit certification to the ISO 40001 is not a requirement. An organization can take advantage of many of the benefits of using the standard without going through the accredited certification process. However, third-party certification, wherein the independent certification body audits your practice and came to the requirements on the standards, is a way of signaling to your buyers, customers, suppliers, and the other stakeholders that you have implemented the standard properly. What's more, for some organizations, but it does, however, help some organizations to demonstrate compliance with regulator or contractual requirements, although with the violation of published standards. ISO does not perform certification. There are some companies that decide not to certificate their environmental management system immediately, although there are many that do decide to do so, and the reason they may less than to the implement it may be. Beijing certificate means Beijing evaluate and accepts by third parties outside the companies who are professional and accredited for this purpose. Beijing certificate can mean an increased commitment to the environment. Certification opens up avenue with the international market and governmental institutions. Certification can eliminate time-consuming complex audits. And finally, the certificate produces a visible symbol for everyone to see that the company is environmental conscious. ISO survey. Certification can be a useful tool to add credibility by demonstrating that your product or service meets the expectation of your customers. For some industries, certification is a legal or contractual requirement. Every year, we perform a survey of certification to our management system standards. The survey shows the number of valid certificates to the ISO management standards, such as ISO 9001 and ISO 14001. Report for each country each year. ISO does not perform certification. Organizations looking to get certificate to an ISO standards must contact an independent certification body. The ISO surveys count the number of certificates used by certification bodies. They have been accredited by members on the International Accreditation Forum, IAF. Choosing a certification body. When choosing a certification body, you should first evaluate several certification bodies. Second, check if the certification body uses the several CASCO standards. And the last point, check if there is accreditation. Accreditation is not compulsory, and no accreditation does not necessarily mean isn't reportable. but it does provide independent confirmation of competence. To find an accredited certification body, contact the national accreditation body in your country or visit the International Accreditation Forum. A company wishing to decertificate its environmental management system according to the ISO 14001 must have a certification body accredited by ENAC, which will be responsible for auditing the environmental management systems, assesses whether it is meets and the requirements on the standards and whether it is correctly implemented in the company. The certification under ISO 40001 of a company is achieved after the chosen certification body has verified that the company meets the requirements defined in the standards and that the environmental management system has been implemented and maintained.
Mapei, the world's largest producer of adhesives, sealants, and construction chemicals, has achieved ISO 14001 certification, an international environmental management standard that demonstrated the company's real commitment to sustainability. The standards, which involves the entire organization, certifies that the company optimizes its actions to reduce its environmental impact while maintaining profitability levels. ISO 14001 establishes guidelines for the reduction of waste generated by companies and more efficient use of natural resources. Obtaining the standard is part of a more ambitious project on the part of Mapei, which a few years ago began the certification processes in quality ISO 9001, environment ISO 14001, and occupational health and safety OHSAS 18001.
Cambridge City Council is a bid to reduce the environmental impact of its activities and drive up inefficient city service. The operational director of Cambridge City Council has achieved a continued to maintain the previous year of certification to two case management system standards, ISO 40001 Environmental Management and ISO 9001 Quality Management. Achieved and maintain ISO 40001 recognizes the Council committed to identify activities that impact on the environmental, understanding relevant environmental laws, and setting objectives for continual improvement. ISO 40001 gives Cambridge City Council a framework within which it can identify initial efficiencies in conjunction with its aims minimizing the effects of the activities on the environment. It has also enabled the Council to focus on key environmental uses. They be allowing into target resources directly into areas which will achieve the greatest effects. New recycling facilities. The transformation work of bulk waste assigned into the recycling facility has meant that recycling rates have increasing from about 5% up to 100% in some cases. One notable success involved general bulkers waste, which in a naturally is difficult to recycle, however tends to staff education, and the council had seen letter rates drop and the recycling rates grow, having both an environmental and financial impact. Finally, environmental management system. The management system has evolved over a number of years. Not only has it become more efficient, but also it has become more visible through a dedicated trade size. The entry is now to at home of environmental management. This is where staff can see policies, procedures, as well as any activity and a raft of useful information, and often in the graphical and interactive way.